Part 2. The Descent. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out beneath me. The sun had set, plunging the world into a darkness that seemed alive, pulsing with malevolent intent. I found myself in a park I didn't recognize, surrounded by trees whose branches reached for me like grasping fingers. Collapsing onto a bench, I struggled to catch my breath. The whispers had faded to a dull murmur, but I could still feel them, a constant pressure at the edges of my consciousness. As my racing heart began to slow, I tried to make sense of what was happening to me. Was I losing my mind? Had I finally cracked under the pressure of academia, of a life spent alone with my books and my thoughts? Or was something truly sinister at work, some force beyond my understanding? As if in answer, I felt a presence behind me. Slowly, dreading what I might see, I turned. There, standing at the edge of the path, was a figure. It was human, in shape, but wrong somehow. Its proportions were slightly off, its movements too fluid to be natural, and its face, where a face should have been, there was only shadow. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to walk towards me, each step silent on the gravel path. As it drew closer, I could hear a sound coming from it, a low, rhythmic chanting in a language I didn't recognize. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't respond. I was frozen in place, watching as the figure drew ever nearer. Just as it was about to reach me, a voice cut through the night.
Michael, are you all right?"
The figure vanished, melting into the shadows as if it had never been there. I blinked, disoriented, and saw Dr. Simmons hurrying towards me, concern etched on her face. "Eleanor?" I managed to croak out. "What are you doing here?" She reached me, slightly out of breath.
"I saw you run out of the building. You looked... I was worried. Michael, what's going on?"
I opened my mouth to explain, then closed it again. How could I possibly make her understand? I'm not sure," I finally said. "I think I might be having some kind of breakdown." Eleanor's face softened. She sat down next to me on the bench, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and comforting.
"Talk to me.
She said gently.
Whatever it is, we can figure it out together."
And so, haltingly at first, then in a rush, I told her everything. The dreams, the whispers, the shadows that haunted my every waking moment. I told her about the writing on my office door, the Bible open to Revelation. As I spoke, I waited for her to recoil, to look at me with fear or disgust. But she just listened, her face a mask of concern and compassion. When I finished, there was a long moment of silence. Then Eleanor spoke, her voice careful.
"Michael, I think you need help. Professional help. What you're describing, it sounds like a severe psychiatric episode. Maybe brought on by stress or..."
"No!" I cut her off, more sharply than I intended. "No, Eleanor, you don't understand. This is real. I know how it sounds, but I swear to you, it's real." She reached out, placing a hand on my arm.
"Okay,
She said softly.
okay. Let's say it is real. What do you think it means? What's causing it?"
I shook my head, feeling lost. "I don't know. But I think it has something to do with the Bible verses, with the warnings about the end times." Eleanor frowned.
"You mean like the apocalypse?" "Michael, you're a historian. You know how many times people have predicted the end of the world. It's never come true.
Maybe this time is different, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Maybe this time, it's really happening. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked out into the darkness of the park, her brow furrowed in thought.
All right.
She said finally.
If this is real, if something is really happening, then we need to figure out what it is. And we need to do it methodically, rationally, like the academics we are.
I felt a surge of gratitude towards her. She didn't believe me. Not really, but she was willing to help. It was more than I could have hoped for. Where do we start? I asked.
With research,
Eleanor said firmly.
we go back to your office, we look at that Bible, we try to understand the context of these verses you've been hearing. And we do it together. I'm not leaving you alone, Michael. Not when you're like this.
I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. We stood, and Eleanor looped her arm through mine as we began to walk back towards the campus. But as we left the park, I glanced back over my shoulder. And there, just for a moment, I saw the shadowy figure again. It raised a hand, as if in greeting or warning, and I heard the whisper, clearer than ever.
The Lamb opens the first seal.
I shuddered, turning away quickly. Eleanor must have felt it, because she squeezed my arm reassuringly. "It's okay," she said. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together." If only I had known then how wrong she was. If only I had realized that by involving Eleanor, I was dooming her to share my fate. Back in my office, the air felt thick, oppressive. The scratches on the door seemed deeper, more ominous. Eleanor examined them closely, her fingertips tracing the jagged letters.
This is unusual,
She murmured.
the depth and precision of these marks. It would take significant force to carve into wood like this.
I moved past her into the office, my eyes immediately drawn to my desk. The Bible was still there, open to Revelation. But now, more verses were underlined, the red marks stark against the thin pages. "Eleanor," I called, my voice shaking. "Look at this." She joined me at the desk, her sharp intake of breath telling me she saw what I did. Not only were more verses marked, but tiny, spidery handwriting filled the margins. It was in a language I didn't recognize, all swooping curves and harsh angles.
What is that?
Eleanor whispered.
Michael, what language is this?
I shook my head, feeling a chill run down my spine. I don't know. I've never seen anything like it. As we stared at the impossible writing, the whispers started again. But this time, they weren't just in my head. Eleanor's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock.
Do you hear that?
She asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, unable to speak. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. And then, to my horror, they began to coalesce into words we could understand.
The second seal is broken. The third approaches. Watch and pray, for the hour of judgment is at hand.
Eleanor grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin.
Michael,
She said, her voice tight with fear.
Michael, what's happening?
Before I could answer, the lights in the office flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, I felt something brush past me, something cold and undeniably alive. Eleanor screamed. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for its light. As the screen illuminated, I saw Eleanor backed against the wall, her face a mask of terror. And between us, taking shape in the shadows, was a figure. It was the same entity I had seen in the park, but now it seemed more solid, more real. As it turned towards me, I saw its face, or rather the absence of a face. Where features should have been, There was only a swirling void, like a black hole ready to consume everything in its path. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you want?" The figure tilted its head, an unnaturally fluid motion, and then it spoke, its voice a chorus of whispers.
We are the Watchers. We are the Heralds. And you, Michael Carver, have been chosen.
"Chosen for what?" I asked, even as part of me screamed not to engage, to run, to wake up from this nightmare. The figure raised a hand, pointing at the Bible on my desk.
To bear witness, to see what must not be seen, to know what must not be known.
Eleanor, who had been frozen in fear, suddenly moved. She lunged for the door, yanking it open.
Michael, run.
She shouted. But as she stepped into the hallway, she collided with someone. A man stood there, his eyes blank and unseeing. Behind him were others, an entire crowd of people, all with the same vacant expression.
It's too late.
The shadowy figure said, its voice almost gentle.
The seals are breaking. The end has begun.
As if on cue, the crowd in the hallway began to chant, their voices a terrible monotone.
Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power, and riches, and wisdom, and strength, and honor, and glory, and blessing.
The shadowy figure moved towards me, its form rippling like smoke.
You have watched, you have prayed, but it is not enough. Now, you must bear your cross.
I felt something being pressed into my hands, something rough and wooden, splinters digging into my palms. I looked down to see a crude cross, its surface stained with what looked horribly like blood.
Michael!
Eleanor's voice cut through the chanting. She was fighting against the crowd, trying to reach me.
Michael, don't listen to it. Whatever it's telling you, it's lying.
The figure turned its void-like face towards her.
Ah, the doubter. Every prophet needs a Judas.
It raised a hand, and Eleanor went rigid, her eyes widening in pain, or shock, or both. "No!" I shouted, dropping the cross and lunging towards her. But the figure was faster. In a blink, it was beside Eleanor, its hand on her shoulder.
The fourth seal breaks,
it intoned.
And hell followed with him.
Eleanor's scream cut off abruptly as she and the figure vanished, leaving behind only a wisp of shadow. I stood there, surrounded by the chanting crowd, the cross at my feet. The whispers in my head had become a roar, drowning out all other thought. Watch and pray, for the hour is at hand. As the world seemed to tilt and spin around me, one thought cut through the chaos. I had to find Eleanor. I had to stop this, whatever it was. Even if it meant facing the end of the world itself.